Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. So I know it's been a minute, but I'm back. I've had to take a couple of days off until the eye issue calmed down a little bit. It got pretty crazy there for a little while, but it's starting to get back to normal slowly but surely. We're getting there. So anyways, today we are here talking about the new Laura Lee Nudie Patootie Palette. So if that's something you guys are interested in looking at, then you're in the right place. We are about to get into it.
I'm a lone wolf. I'm a lone wolf. I'm a lone wolf. I'm a lone wolf. I'm a lone wolf.
So Laura Lee has launched her new palette, and boy, I tell you, every time this poor girl launches a palette, it is like the controversy of the century for whatever reason. The first palette, I'll put the review up here. We actually reviewed here on this channel. I loved the Cat's Pajamas palette, and I loved it because the formula was phenomenal. It is a palette that is well loved. It is a palette that I consistently reach for. I still have it. It was a very warm tone palette, so it obviously spoke to my heart. I have done most damage to Scatterbrain, but this for me was a great formulation. Now, most of the criticism of the Cat's Pajamas palette was the cohesiveness of the palette itself. A lot of people didn't like that the outside was this kind of glitter and then the inside was this crazy flower print with the broken up mirror, and the names of the shadows didn't seem cohesive with the theme Cat's Pajamas. A lot of people didn't understand what the Cat's Pajamas meant, and so that whole southern slang verbiage was lost on them, and it just seemed to a lot of people like it came off as a big confusing mess. But to me, the formulation was actually quite fabulous. The pigment was absolutely amazing, and I was very excited when I learned that she was coming out with another palette. Now, the controversy around this palette is whether or not it is usable on dark skin and light skin. A lot of people are saying that this palette is geared to anybody that has the skin tone of flower, and that dark skin girls are going to be left out when it comes to this palette. That's the number one criticism that I see out online anymore about just about anything. People are really quick to jump on that bandwagon lately. Sometimes it's justified, and sometimes I think it's just the beauty community piling on and virtue signaling and trying to see who's the most virtuous out of the beauty community. And so sometimes I feel like it's exaggerated, and that's a shame, because in this situations where it's a genuine concern and voices should be heard, it kind of gets lost in the times where people blow stupid things out of proportion, and it just muddies the waters. And that's unfortunate, because I think sometimes it is important for that particular point to be made, and I think sometimes that voice loses its punch when you have so many instances of people just overreacting. So that was the first criticism. The second criticism was actually some conflicting pictures that were out before the palette release, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. In some pictures, the palette looked brown, and in other pictures, it looked like it was more of a pinky kind of themed palette. So people were very unsure of what they were getting. In her introduction video that she did on YouTube, it looked to be a much more pink tone, and on the website, it looks very much to be a dark bronzy kind of brown tone palette. So that caused a lot of confusion as well. And then the third criticism is the price point. It's a $45 palette, and a lot of people are unsure of whether or not that's justified. So we're going to cover all three of these points, go over the palette itself, look at the colors, do some swatches, and let you guys decide what you think about Nudie Patootie. All right, so first let's recap Cat's Pajamas. This is a $40 palette. This palette consists of 10 pans that are a fairly big size. And for an indie brand, a lot of times they do have to kind of keep that price up there, especially when they're produced in the United States, which both of these palettes are. So this again was 10 pans, and this was retailed for $40. All right, so let's get to the Nudie Patootie. This is the outside unicarton that comes with it. It's just nude, and it says Laura Lee Nudie Patootie. On the back, it has the Laura Lee emblem, and then it has a little bit of information down here, and then of course this is the front. Laura Lee is based out of Los Angeles, and of course, again, her palette is made in the United States. As always, Laura Lee is a cruelty-free brand as well. So you take this out of its carton, and this is what the palette itself looks like. So it's kind of this matte embossment. It says Nudie Patootie here. On the back, you have the Laura Lee emblem and just a little distribution sticker here. It has her YouTube handle, and it has the little cruelty-free PETA bunny on there as well. I love the outside of this. It's very sleek. It's very pretty. This kind of nude pink, it's matte, so you can feel like it's a very soft matte. And then this is like embossed on the outside. I think it's very sleek. It's very chic. I think this shows a lot more class and a lot more, I guess you would kind of say, maturity than this one. This one looks very fun, very young. The concept in this is a lot more cohesive, and I think this looks very chic. So I really like the design of this, and you know, it's got nice little detailing on the edge as well. So overall, for me, the outside packaging is a win. It is magnetized, so it's a little bit of a magnet. And then this is the palette itself. It has like a rose gold foil on the inside. It has a huge mirror, and then I'll let you guys take a look at these colors. And it's funny because I was a little curious as to whether or not this would be more pinky or more brown. And then when I actually got it, it looks like it's actually a good combination of both, which is why I can probably see the pictures coming off the way that they do. So here is a look at the palette itself. It has a lot of these neutral colors in it that are pink and brown in tone, with some pops of yellow, and it also has some beautiful glitters in it as well. So is this an all brown palette? No. Is this an all pink palette? No, it's not. This is a neutral palette, and I really actually like the colors in this. So those are the colors. This is what it looks like. Now this one retails for $45, but in this palette you're actually getting 14 pans for $45. So let's talk about the price point really quickly. So this is 14 pans for $45, and the pans are a very large size. I think 14 pans in a palette is actually pretty stunning. I think this was a great feat for her to tackle. Now, just for comparison, you guys already know that I have reviewed the Colored Rain Queen of Hearts palette. This is a palette that I think is stunning. This is another indie brand palette. So I think these are two good brands to compare to each other. They're both indie brands. Both of them started out as indie brands, and when the Queen of Heart palette was released, this was prior to Colored Rain recently signing on with Target and becoming a much more mass distributed brand. So back when Colored Rain was a very just starting out indie brand, they put out the Queen of Hearts palette, which they priced at $50. And the Colored Rain palette is known for its pigmentation, how beautiful it is. The formula is absolutely stunning. I've reviewed the palette on this channel, and it's amazing. This $50 palette palette only has 12 pans, and this was $5 more than the Laura Lee Nudie Patootie. So let's look at the two of them side by side. These are put much closer together because, well, there's 2 additional colors in this one. So not only does this one have 14 shades and it's $5 cheaper, this one only has 12 and it's $5 more expensive. So if you ask me, the way that she priced this palette, considering that she's an indie brand made in the USA, the formula is pretty good, guys. I know we're talking about spoilers here before swatches, but it's a really good formula. I think the price point is perfect. All right, so let's talk about the women of color argument when it comes to the Nudie Patootie palette. So I think that people were too quick to jump the gun on whether or not this could be used on women of color. So first, let's just show all of the women of color that have actually worn the Nudie Patootie palette and all of the different looks they have come up with. Now these are a blend of YouTubers and people on Instagram that are tagging the Nudie Patootie palette and saying that they've worked with it, and to be honest with you, a lot of these looks are stunning, including the woman of color that is actually in Laura Lee's campaign. And I encourage you all to go look at her Instagram and YouTube channel. She is a wonderful and amazing person. I got curious because I didn't know who she was and I'd never seen her model before, so I dug a little bit into her Instagram and her YouTube channel, and she is actually a very, very stunning person, individual in her own right, and I think she's going to go far in her modeling career. But that's a side note. Back to the palette itself. So not only has this been demonstrated to have been worn by many women of color and loved by many women of color, but let's go back to the Colored Rain palette for just a minute. The Queen of Hearts palette was well received by women of color, mainly because Colored Rain is a Black-owned beauty brand. So this brand is run by women of color with the mission statement of putting out palettes that are inclusive to everyone, including women of color. So let's look at just the Queen of Hearts palette and the Nudie Patootie palette. And I think you guys will notice that there are quite a few similarities here. So you have the same pinky nudes, all of the light colors that are in the Nudie Patootie palette are in the Queen of Hearts palette as well. So you have the white shades, you have the khaki shades, you have the dark brown shades, and then you have the foils in here. So there have been some different choices made in this one, whereas some purples and oranges were chosen, and then down here she chose to go a different direction with some additional foils. But overall, there are a lot of similarities between these two palettes, and there's 2 more shadows in this one than there is this one. So I don't think that there's enough of a difference between these 2 palettes that you would instantly grab this one and scream that this is only for the fairest of the fair, and that's all that can use it. I think that argument is a little short-sighted, and I don't think it's appropriate for this particular palette. All right, so having said all of that, let's actually get a really good up-close look at this palette. I'm going to show you guys an up-close picture of this palette. The names of the particular colors are all cohesive with the theme Nudie Patootie. They're all kind of slang words that go with being naked. For example, stark, undressed, streaking, uncover, strip, butt naked, jaybird, au natural, exposed, buff, nakey, and etc. So it is a theme that is carried throughout the palette itself. And then, of course, you have beautiful mattes, you have shimmers, and then, of course, you actually have pressed glitters, which definitely have to be worked with in a particular way, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But overall, it's really a beautiful palette, and again, I am loving the fact that there are 14 shades in this sucker. But even though she's put 14 pans in here, it still is like a nice size. It's not like a big square awkward palette with 14 shades in it. It's very slim, it's very sleek. It's still travel purse friendly. So I do like that about it. I like that she chose to go with 14 shades, but she kept it in a very slim, sleek format. So that's definitely appealing to me. So let's go ahead and get into some swatches. Alright guys, now with these swatches, we are going to go just a little bit differently. I want to do these swatches by finishes. So first we're going to start with the 8 mattes in this palette. Now when it comes to the matte formula, Laura Lee has done an amazing job at these mattes. They're beautiful. It's a beautiful range of neutrals with a few pops of colors. It has great transition colors in here for any eye look. And overall, I was very, very happy with the mattes. Now, in addition to the mattes, there are 4 shimmer shades. Now, these shimmer shades look beautiful. I absolutely love the way that they apply. I haven't noticed any transfer. Keep in mind with shimmer shades, it's always best to use a pigment primer or a glitter glue to avoid that transfer. But these shimmers look beautiful with a dry brush or with a wet brush. Now, the 2 foil eyeshadows. Now, these foils are incredibly highly pigmented. They are very loose in the pan, and you can either add a foil on top of a regular shade just to make that shade pop or really stand out, or you could just use a foil on the eye, however you want to do it. But with the foils, you want to be very, very careful. While they are incredibly stunning on the eye, they're incredibly stunning in the pan. They are very, you have to be very gentle when working with them. So you really want to go in lightly with a brush. My personal opinion with foils is I really, really like using my finger. In addition to that, if you guys have one of these, so one of these type applicators, like the old school eyeshadow applicators, I always keep one of these around. The one that I have actually has a flat brush on this side, and then it has the old eyeshadow applicator on the end, and these are fantastic when it comes to using foil shadows. Now, I've actually used this palette on my eyes tonight, but because my eyes are such a hot mess right now, I really didn't want to put you guys through the close-up of what they look like, because there's lots of peeling and skin hanging, and ugh, it's just gross. So again, not only is this palette cruelty-free, but it's also vegan as well. I know there are a lot of my subscribers out there that always ask about that, so this is a vegan palette. So overall, guys, for a 14 pan palette with 8 mattes, 4 shimmers, and 2 foils, this palette is stunning. It is easily blendable. The colors are very buildable. They last a very long time on the eyes. I've worn them for 10, 11, 12-hour days, always with an eye primer. I did wear them one day without an eye primer because my eyes at that time couldn't handle an eye primer because I had a lot of cracking going on my eyelids, but I did still get a full 8 hours worth of wear out of the eyeshadows, so they perform great. I think the formula is still intact. It is still as good as ever and definitely worth the $45. I absolutely think that this palette is a palette that darker skinned women can have in their collection and utilize just as good as anyone else out there, and I think to say anything otherwise is disingenuous and discounting our dark-skinned divas out there that can pull off some pretty damn good looks with a neutral palette. I think the Nudie Patootie palette is versatile enough to give you plenty of everyday looks with the ability to transition into like day to night, especially with those 2 foils. Keep in mind, those 2 foils are going to perform better with glitter glue or a wet brush because they are just really pressed glitters, and they're very creamy and they're very soft, but you are going to need to work with those, so keep that in mind as well. The one criticism that I do have about the Nudie Patootie palette is the way that it was packaged. So the Nudie Patootie palette itself was wrapped in bubble wrap, but it came in a pretty big box. And unfortunately, the palette was not in that box snug. You know what I'm saying? So it was wrapped in bubble wrap, but there was so much room for that palette to flop around and bang around in that box during transit that when I cut open the box and I lifted the lid and saw how it was packaged, I was immediately worried about damage. Thank goodness I unwrapped the bubble wrap and my palette was intact, but I can absolutely see how this could possibly be an issue because the palette does not sit snugly in that box. There's way too much room. It has the potential to bang around in there way too much. So that's my only criticism. Like, they didn't even put tissue paper in the box, like around the palette that's wrapped in bubble wrap. They didn't put tissue paper in there. They didn't put those big clear blow up bubbles that you see from like Ulta or Sephora. Those weren't in there. There was nothing in there to kind of keep the palette inside of that box snug and not just banging around inside of that box. So that is a huge concern. Now, there are some rumblings around out there that Nudie Patootie is eventually going to be available at Ulta. Laura Lee herself has tweeted out some hints stating that Nudie Patootie may be headed that way. If that's something that you guys are concerned about, then you may want to wait until it's available at Ulta and you can actually go to the store and pick it up so you don't have to worry about damage in transit. However, I understand that the issues that I've seen of people that have had damaged palettes are getting replacement palettes from the Laura Lee Los Angeles team. It's still a big headache to go through, and I know how incredibly disappointing it is when you get a palette home and it's damaged, especially when you've paid $45 for said palette. So, in my opinion, they need to do some work on the shipping itself, but as far as the product, it's definitely Erika approved. Alright guys, as always, thank you guys so much for coming by and hanging out with me. If this is your first time here, don't forget to hit the subscribe button before you leave. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you're notified every time I upload a video. We are going to be doing a giveaway on our next video, so everybody stay tuned for that. And if you like the work I do and you'd like to support this channel, the link to be able to do that will be in the final credits. So as always, I hope everyone is happy and I hope you guys are healthy, and I will see you guys in the next video. Mwah.